Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my 2025-2026 NFL season wrap-up video. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we are at a very sad time of the NFL season because it's over. It is officially over now. We are done. 285 games have been played through the 2025-2026 season, something that started on September 4th, the Thursday after Labor Day, ended this past Sunday on February 8th, 2026. That is the 2025 NFL season done in a nutshell. It's very sad time, but I just wanted to make this video real quick just to go over, my thoughts on the Super Bowl, my thoughts on a lot of the big stories throughout the league, good, bad, and different, surprise or non-surprise. And at the end, I'm going to give my Super Bowl 61 prediction, which will be on Valentine's Day next year. So from 367 days, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be talking about the Super Bowl. And I know it's going to be a lot of time, but, the good news is that's still about 6 months away, and I think there are other sports things that will be around to help me keep interested. And I will be, absolutely still keeping up on the off-season through the Combine, free agency, and the NFL Draft before we get to OTAs and minigames. But just overall for the year, though, just to recap what happened for the postseason. So, unfortunately for me, against the spread, after starting off 4-2 against the spread through Wild Card Weekend, the next 3 remaining weekends, the Divisional, the Conference Championship, and the Super Bowl weekend, I went 0-7 against the spread. That is very disappointing, very frustrating. But overall, though, I can accept that in the grand scheme of things. But let me look here real quickly. If I do this right, let's see. Let's see, 130, 150, and 5.46. Oh, okay, 0.465. And then 81. Sorry, everybody, I'm just trying to do this in real time so I can get my percentages correct properly. 0.637. Right. There we go. Yep, but through 285 games against the spread, to go 0-7 against the spread, I do have to acknowledge, though, that the Super Bowl, I thought for a split second as the game was starting to go with the field goals, I thought maybe that I could have a chance at getting that 4.5-point spread. But after the one touchdown to A.J. Barner, that basically killed that. And for the Pats, that was just an all-time rear-end kicking by the Seahawks defense. Will Campbell and the other rookie had a brutal time trying to protect Drake May. Drake May got sacked 6 times and tied an NFL record, or tied a postseason record for the time sacked in a postseason. I believe it was sacked 21 times. That is definitely not going to help you get anywhere or win anything, especially the Super Bowl. But I did win the Super Bowl, so I'll gladly take that. But overall, for the postseason through the 13 games, I won 4-9 against the spread, and straight up, I won 8-5. So that equals 31% or 0.308% against the spread, 61.5% straight up. So, definitely disappointing with my spread record for the postseason. Really wanted to try to get it going forward, but I have to objectively try to defend that. But now overall for my spread picks, I went 13 of 28, so a little bit under 50%. I did have 5 pushes, and straight up for the year, I went 181, 103, and 1. So 78 games above 500. Usually, I'm a little bit better than that, about 80 to 90 games above 500 throughout the year. Of course, the one push was back in week 4 with the Packers and the Cowboys. But, still overall, though, 46.5% against the spread, straight up 63, 64%. straight up. So definitely overall, though, fun year. Sad that it's over, and hopefully next year with a new set of new predictions, new life. Hopefully I can improve on my spread predictions there. But what a crazy season this year was. If you were going to tell people before the year started that the Pats and the Seahawks were going to be in the Super Bowl and the Chiefs and Ravens weren't even going to make the playoffs, that would have been crazy to think about, 6 months ago, 4 or 5 months ago when the season started. So crazy to think about that. When you look at how bad the Raiders did this year, everybody thought that Geno and Pete Carroll were going to, take a significant leap, or maybe not significant leap, but they were going to take a leap to be at least a respectable football team. They end up doing so badly that Geno Smith ends up leading the league in interceptions, and Pete Carroll gets fired and one and done. And now they have Clint Kubiak and probably Fernando Mendoza as the new regime, the fourth or fifth one of the last 5 years for the Raiders organization. And look, the Raiders overall, I thought, they do have a couple nice pieces. Colton Miller, Genty, Bowers, Trey Turner. They have Eichenberg, like one of the linebackers. Like, they have some, decent pieces in different spots. But I think this Raider team is way far away from making any significant level of contention. But I do think the Raiders, if they get Mendoza, if Kubiak can build a good enough system with a good enough DC, the Raiders could possibly get 8 wins this year and they finally start moving forward that way. When you look at some of the other, teams around the league and their stories, one of the big stories this year was for Tua Tagovailoa, and one of the big stories in the offseason will be seeing what happens with the Dolphins quarterback, Miami Dolphins starter Tua Tagovailoa, and Cardinals starter Kyler Murray, who both lost their jobs during the season. One was for a foot sprain, that ended up going through the whole end of the year. However, Jonathan Gannon did mention that even if Kyler was fully healthy, he still would have gone with Jacoby. And where I thought that was a mistake, and I still think it was, because Jacoby only won one game afterward, and that was beating up the Cowboys defense before they got Quinnen Williams and Logan Wilson. They didn't win a game after that at all, even though Jacoby had all put up good numbers. But the Cardinals then fired Gannon and now have Mike LaFleur, the Rams offensive coordinator, trying to be the new head coach for the team, and he has a massive question there. Just like the Dolphins have a significant question with Tua Tagovailoa, who got benched by Mike McDaniel. I was going to say Mike McCarthy, but Mike McDaniel, who was fired, and he now is the Chargers offensive coordinator. And now they have Jeff Hafley, the former defensive coordinator of the Packers, former Boston College coach. He now has a significant question in hand with the quarterback status there. And I think the option that I think they're going to go with, since Jeff has time in Green Bay and so does John Eric Sullivan, I believe the Green Bay Packers are going to be a team that targets Malik Willis to come in and at least compete with someone, or compete probably with Quinn Ewers, or he and Quinn Ewers will probably be competing for the Dolphins quarterback spot, where the Cardinals may end up going with a veteran like Kirk Cousins, or just some veteran journeyman quarterback, or they could stick with Jacoby and bring in a young guy. But I think that's a big question for the Cardinals and the Dolphins. Two teams that had talent in certain ways, and the Cardinals probably have more young talent to build on than the Dolphins do. But I also think that the Dolphins' biggest problem is, the other big problem for those two franchises is the cap situations with cutting or trading those quarterbacks. They're probably going to have to release those quarterbacks, but those are going to be significant cap hits that are going to significantly hamper them in the offseason. But the Cardinals and Dolphins, that was a big story for those quarterback failures. When you look at some of the positive stories, let's look at the Jacksonville Jaguars and Chicago Bears very quickly. The Jags, the Duval man, who was second in the league in Coach of the Year voting, I thought had a fantastic year, and he has revitalized this franchise the way his offense ran. I think the Jags have a great defense with Devin Lloyd, with Josh Hines-Allen, with Cisco, with all these good defensive pieces around them, with Eric Armstead. Like, this Jags team has a good young defense. Anthony Campanelli, who was able to maintain the Jags, fortunately, were able to maintain their offensive coordinator and their defensive coordinator. Grant and Anthony were able to stay at least for one more year. They both got raises. But that Jags team has a lot of good potential moving forward. I think they have a good list of B receivers. They're very much like the Packers, ironically enough, where Liam got his defensive coordinator from. To where they have a lot of good B players, and Trevor and Jordan are kind of at the same spot where they're both kind of up or down quarterbacks that you've seen the talent in them. Trevor's first half was awful this year, but you watch Trevor Lawrence in the second half, he was sensational. And he definitely kind of showed some promise. But the Jags, they're an ascending team that next year with the Texans, even though they won the South, the Jags will definitely be a player in that division and around the league for the next few years to come. And Chicago very much the same way. Chicago with Ben Johnson, with the improvement on the offensive line, adding Joe Thuney and Jackson from the Rams, and the right tackle who was very good. I forget his name, but adding Darnell Wright. There, I had to think of his name. But Cole and Colston and DJ and Bird, and this Bears team is incredibly loaded. And I think, in a good position that they will make a lot of noise if Caleb can grow and develop in Ben Johnson's offense next season. It's going to be a big year, his second year in that system. But the Jags and Bears ascensions with young offensive minds was a great story to see this year. And I think for both franchises, they have to feel good that they at least can be relevant for the next several years. But then it's just going to be up to them to see if they can continue to build off of pieces with their cap situations, see if they can just elevate it with more talent. Especially the big thing for Jacksonville will be the return of wide receiver and cornerback Travis Hunter back to the team, and it's significant that way. But that was a big story. But another story on the other way is the disappointment in the young coaches of the older veteran quarterbacks. Two of the core four, actually all three of the core four quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, the four arguable, by people's estimations, four best quarterbacks in the NFL. Three of them missed the playoffs entirely. Joe missed it because he had a significant turf toe injury that sidelined him for at least an 8-game sample, where they went 1-7 or 8 or 9 games, where they went 1-7 or 1-8 in that stretch. The only game they won was the Pittsburgh Steelers game, where Joe Flacco, Pro Bowler Joe Flacco, kudos to Joe Flacco for getting his first and only Pro Bowl nod, that the Bengals couldn't recover even when Joe came back because they went 5-3 in the games that he was in after they had the 1-8 stretch without. And then you had Patrick Mahomes, of course, the close games that they had. This is Patrick Mahomes' single worst statistical year. They had a lot of injuries in different ways, and of course he tops it off by tearing his ACL. But now the Chiefs are in a very unique position to where I think for the first time in about 12 or 13 years, they're going to be starting to do a rebuild of maybe what the Pats dynasty was. And it is really creepy if you really think about it. How parallel and even both Tom and Patrick's careers have been through this point in many years. And again, the next phase of the Brady run here was that for the next 2 seasons, they didn't even make it. They didn't even win a playoff game those next 2 years after Brady came back from the ACL. I think Patrick Mahomes can win a playoff game, but after thinking that they were going to win the AFC West by a landslide last year, this year I don't have them winning the AFC West. But for the next couple of years, they could be in a very similar situation to where they're rebuilding the team. The Chiefs could be back in the playoffs, but they could, and I don't think they will, be the Super Bowl favorite moving forward. And then the Ravens, of course, my team, they had a massive change at the end after they had a 1-4 start, turned into a 7-5 stretch, with Lamar having injuries to his ankle, his foot, his toe, his elbow. Basically, he felt like the operation man, and he was able to get him to a point to where they had a chance to win. It wasn't his fault that he lost, but Tyler Luke did miss a field goal that let the Steelers get in the playoffs, and now the Ravens have a completely different outlook and coaching staff on the organization due to Steve Bisciotti's desire to win. But that was a massive story. And it's crazy that the one guy that made it from the core four, that made the playoffs, couldn't even get to the AFC title game where he probably could have beat New England of how bad the snow was. But that's just how significant that was. that for Josh Allen, in the biggest opportunity of his career, he continued to show that he would continue to blow it, in big spots. And then you have, just kind of going through some of the other team aspects or team stories, a lot of mid-teams kind of emerged to where you could be optimistic about some, pessimistic about other ones. Such as if you were a Vikings fan, you probably have to be more optimistic today with, a Vikings fan, that you have to be more pessimistic. That, yes, you did have a 5-game win streak, but you ended up, not finding out that you didn't have a quarterback. You fired your general manager. Your players are telling you that you made a massive mistake by not re-signing Sam Darnold. JJ is a constant injury problem. Brian Flores isn't that great to work with. Like, there's so many problems with the Vikings. And there was a report that I heard that I saw that the Vikings are probably looking at getting another veteran quarterback to compete with J.J. McCarthy. That could be Kyler, that could be Kirk, that could be Tua. And I just think objectively, I don't think J.J. McCarthy is an NFL quarterback. I don't think he's an NFL quarterback. I think if the Vikings are going to give that other veteran quarterback, whoever it is, older, younger, retread or not, that guy will probably beat J.J. out in the eyes of the fans and the coaching staff. And I think for the Vikings management, Kevin O'Connell, who got to survive the firing of Mensa, he needs to be fired next year. If the Minnesota Vikings do not make the playoffs, or the Minnesota Vikings have another non-playoff season, winning record or not, Kevin O'Connell needs to be fired because he is not a great coach. This is a guy that's been in the league for 5 years. He's missed the playoffs 3 of the 5 years he's been there. And what he's shown is that maybe he can't develop a quarterback. Maybe he can't develop a quarterback. And for a guy that was heralded from the Rams organization of being that guy, we're going 5-6 years into this run, and if he can't find it or the staff made a mistake, his head needs to be the next one on the chopping block there. For the Lions, look, it was a up and down year in the sense of where they definitely miss Ben Johnson. And the John Morton thing was an absolute failure because Dan Campbell, by the middle of the year, took away the play calling from Morton, which basically made John Morton offensive coordinator by name only. But the Lions threw it all, even though Jared Goff had a very good year, second in passing yards, one of the more accurate passers. He just had that Viking game where he completely self-destructed, and the Lions somehow choked the postseason berth to where the Packers had lost 5 straight. All the Lions had to do was beat Pittsburgh in the game in Week 17, and they called the touchdown, but Amon-Ra interfered offensively, which knocked them out of the postseason entirely, which is a doggone shame. Because I know the Lions, with their offense, they could have been competitive with basically anybody. But you have that, But that's optimistic, maybe with the Lions moving forward into next year. But then you have the NFC South debacle this year, to where the Panthers, the Bucks, the Saints, and the Falcons, you basically, in a weird way, in my opinion, going into next year, that is a Spider-Man meme, to where you can look at all 4 teams and say there are not a lot of discerning qualities between each team. Where the Panthers, they saw progress with Bryce Young, and Bryce does seem like the first guy since Cam to possibly be a franchise quarterback. And for the Falcons, they did the Falcon thing. They had Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins. Michael Penix partially tears his ACL. And now, you have Kirk Cousins come in. He goes 4-1 in his starts. They get to an 8-win threshold. But Arthur Blank, rightfully so, I guess thought, well, we're just going to be stuck with this margin forever, so let's fire Raheem. Let's fire Terry. We're going to hire Ian Cunningham, Matt Ryan, and retread Kevin Stefanski, which I think is an absolutely terrible hire. Because, again, people need to realize he might be the 3rd best Brown coach in Cleveland Browns history, but he coached 101 games and went 46-55 in those 101 games. So, at the end of the day, he's still a losing coach. And you can talk about the Browns culture all you want. He's the 3rd best coach in Browns history. Outside of that in the NFL, that doesn't matter. He sucks to coach. And now that you have this whole James Pierce situation, have fun with that, Ian. Have fun with that, Kevin. Have fun with that, Jeff. Have fun with that, Matt. But this isn't about to talk about that type of story here. I was going to mention that there. And then you have the Saints, who I like. I was, one of the bigger Tyler Shug fans coming out of the draft. I thought it was ridiculous how Saints fans and the entire national media just ripped on this kid immediately from day one and said the Saints, by drafting this kid, they were going to be the number one pick in the draft. And boy, by the second half of the year, boy, did Tyler Shough prove a lot of those people wrong. And I'm not saying Tyler Shough should be the long-term answer for the New Orleans Saints, but he did well enough that he's better than Spencer Rattler. And actually, for the first time, the Saints have a manageable cap situation. Sean Payton left them in salary cap purgatory, in misery for all these years. And now they finally have a quarterback. They have some young offensive pieces. Cam Jordan and DeMario may have to go, so you could be in a changing regard, but the Saints finally had the opportunity maybe to build something with a quarterback that seems like the best one they've had since Drew, and maybe the third best one they've had in franchise history. I think that's incredibly positive. Tampa, the team that I thought was going to have the number one offense in the league, just got decimated with injuries early on. But then, by the end, Baker and them just couldn't get it done. And the worst part was they lost a bunch of games to teams they should have been able to beat. They were playing lowly Dolphins. The only one they had was against the Cardinals and Panthers. But they lost to the Falcons twice. They lost to the Falcons twice. They lost to Carolina. They lost to Miami. They lost so many games down the stretch that they should have been able to win and take the NFC South for the taking. But they couldn't do it. So, but then you have the so all four of these teams going into next year. You look at the NFC South, and I will tell you this right now, barring one of my hot takes for the year, that I might hold on to, might not. I still have time of the offseason to change. The Saints would be my pick to win the NFC South next year. I have enough faith in the Saints that I think that they can win the NFC South next year with the roster they have, the coaching they have, and the ability of their staff to get better to move forward. And then a couple, other stories. The Jets, very quickly, what a moment for them. NFL history, ladies and gentlemen. First team in NFL history to not have an interception through a 17-game season. That is remarkable ineptitude that will never be duplicated again for the first time. But the Jets did decide to keep their coach. They did hire Brian Duker as their defensive coordinator and Frank Reich as their offensive coordinator. Really inspiring hires by the Jets organization. But the Jets, we'll see what happens with Glenn. I think he'll probably get about 6 to 7 games to start the year. If they won 2 or 3 of those games, I could ever see Woody Johnson firing Aaron Glenn for how bad the Jets have been. But, and then you look at some of the other teams. The Colts collapse is a massive story. I think the Colts, they need to, objectively, in my opinion, they need to not give Daniel Jones any more money. Daniel Jones, where you could feel bad and empathetic for him tearing his Achilles, though he was a moron for playing with a fracture in his ankle. People need to remember that part of the story, ladies and gentlemen. Just like Carson Wentz with his shoulder, he willingly played with that bad ankle and then ended up tearing an Achilles. And again, just to be fair, to be objective, Daniel Jones was starting to show signs of choking anyway, boys and girls. He was starting to show signs of choking. Look at the Steeler game. Look at the Texan game. Look at the Chief game. In the biggest of moments, did Daniel Jones really show you, or I mean not the Steeler game, because the Steeler game, he spit up all over himself in the Steeler game. But the Texans game and the Chiefs game, when you really needed it, did Daniel Jones come through? No, he did not. And I honestly think if I were the Colts, I would let Riley Leonard, because I saw some flashes out of Riley Leonard against the number 1 defense in the NFL, the Houston Texans, that I would give Riley Leonard a legitimate opportunity, a legitimate competition to compete with Daniel Jones. If they bring him back for a 1-year prove-it type deal again with the injury, I would let Riley Leonard compete with Daniel Jones to see which quarterback can win that competition, because I think that's the best thing for the Colts' future moving forward. And then you just had a lot of mid-questions about the Packers, the Niners, elevated themselves up to a B+, and then failed again. You had the Brown situation with Shador, Myles Garrett breaking the sack record, but Shador is just, and we'll see what the Browns do with Todd Monken now in this quarterback room. with Deshaun, with Shador, with that running style and all that. I don't objectively know how that will go. But those are kind of my overall thoughts. For a majority of the year for the teams. Like I said, shout out to Seattle. What a game! Dominant defensive performance. But as I end this video here with a big question, let me tell everyone. Lastly, my Super Bowl 61 prediction in Los Angeles on Valentine's Day 2027. My prediction as of today. By the time I do my next video through the offseason and draft, I will make a change to this prediction depending on what happens. But my prediction before anything happens again, I am going to go with, instead of taking the champion, and I took the Bills and Eagles I did before, my pick this year, for next year, 367 days from the game, the Denver Broncos are going to get to SoFi Stadium to play the Chicago Bears. So right now, my Super Bowl 61 prediction will be Denver playing Chicago at SoFi. I think that'd be a great game between Caleb and Bo. A lot of intrigue there. But once again, Denver at Chicago is my very early Super Bowl 61 prediction. Super Bowl LXI 61 prediction. Denver at Chicago. So that's it. So I do want to say very quickly, though, thank you to all my viewers out there that have watched throughout the years. I greatly appreciate the time that you guys all take in watching these videos and hearing me just rant and rave about my picks. And hopefully I, made you smarter. Hopefully you took my advice. Hopefully you enjoyed the content. Hopefully, hopefully you got some good nuggets of stats, good nuggets of wisdom. Hopefully you enjoyed just how I present the games or all my predictions. And I want to say to all my viewers out there, I greatly appreciate the time, the views, and the comments from them, especially from the NFL YouTube Prognosticators, that group. Thank you all so much. And that is it. So, until... Let's see here. Until Monday, September 7th, this is Matt the Fanatic signing off. Until then, everyone, enjoy the offseason. And best of luck to everyone. And once again, my Super Bowl 61 prediction, Denver at Chicago. And until September 7th, everyone, this is Matthew Fanatic signing off. Until then, everyone, so long.